I know a place, ain't nobody crying, ain't nobody worried, there's only smiling faces, 'cause they're lying to the races. Somebody help me. Oh, help me.
I'll take you there.
Oh, help me.
I'll take you there.
Somebody help me.
I'll take you there.
'Cause they're lying to the races.
I'll take you there.
Only smiling faces.
I'll take you there.
Somebody help me. 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 'Cause they're only smiling faces. And they're lying to the races. Help me. I know a place. Ain't nobody crying. Ain't nobody worried. Only smiling faces. 'Cause they're lying to the race. Somebody help me. 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 Sandra, help me. 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 See, I know a place. Ain't nobody crying. Ain't nobody worried. Only smiling faces. I'll take you there. 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 I'll take you there.
I think you did take us there, Linda. I think it's here. I hope it's here. Better be. I'm a little loud here, aren't I? Let me see if that works. Is that good? Volume? How about this? Better. Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Well, I don't have much to say anyway, so don't get too excited. This is Pacific Unitarian Universalist Church, in case you thought you were somewhere else. And we're environmentally minded. We're committed to being a liberal religious voice. Being a liberal religious voice means that we are a tolerant voice more than anything else. We're modern. We're welcoming to people of all races and creeds and gender identities and sexual identities. That's our best side. We also have a lot of internal squabbles and petty fights like any village, but, you know, hey, whatever. Anyone with a cell phone is encouraged to return that phone call and message while their phone is set on silent. Don't be that person. We're not that open-minded. Those with young children are young kids we have a nursery that starts before church, and those who have older kids or anything sort of above elementary school, in elementary school or above, can come for a children's moment, and then we have children's programming after that. Let's see. Sylvia's going to give us a quick announcement about Godfrey's party. Take it away, Syl.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sylvia Lawrence. I am the director of Pacific Unitarian's preschool, Pacific Sage Preschool. And we are having a tree dedication and a 100th birthday celebration for Dr. Godfrey Purnell, who was very much instrumental in having the school created and stood up. So it is Sunday, March the 20th, right after services. There will be live music, there will be light refreshments, and luscious cake, a little alliteration. So we want all of you to join us in celebrating his life and his accomplishments.
It would be his 100th birthday.
His 100th birthday would be Monday the 21st.
Yeah.
So, and it's been a year since he passed away. You know, COVID steals more than just our health. So if there's any questions, there's a number. There's flyers on some of the seats, and I will go print some more and put them out somewhere so that you can get them to remember. And we would really love to have all of you. We're inviting all the families and the children and stuff. So yes, it's an outdoor garden party. So Steve will say a few words to spiritually bolster our trees. We planted pomegranates for him because he had big pomegranate trees in his yard and would bring those to us. An amazing man.
Thanks, Syl. You want to give that, Tracy. Okay, we got a few other things cooking. We've done a great job in this church in being, this is so fun, involved with writing postcards. Many of you have done this. We have a bunch. Kelly back there in that brown paper bag has some. There's 20 in a pack. They're not supposed to be mailed till May 1st, so probably the easiest thing to do is bring them back here, and then we'll all mail them at once on the right date. But there's stuff to pick up there for you if you want. Right after church today, there is a family fun day. They're going to play games, card games in particular, and that should be kind of raucous fun. And there's also, obviously, a pledge drive on right now, so we're planning a phone tree event. We're going to train folks on 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon for anyone who wants to be a part of that. Feels like they want to make, 7, 8 phone calls to people in the church to get out their pledge. So if you get your pledge in, you get off the list. So a lot of talk about no-fly zones these days. You'll be on the no-call zone list. So, which causes us to think about Ukraine. We're going to do it in joys and concerns, but let's take a moment. We pray that people be well. We pray that our privilege not be lost to those who are in harm's way. We pause that the world not be too racist in aligning with the white people when migrants are all around the world as well. We pray that world leaders come to their senses and find exit strategies that seem unlikely. We we pray as Abraham Lincoln would pray for our better angels to rise to the surface. I'm going to sprinkle other announcements in through the service. I don't want to leave that unattended to. I'm going to invite Tracy up to read our chalice words, and I'm going to light our chalice. Oh, Marvel's birthday. I will want to slip that in there. There we go. Sorry. Trying to slide. 102. 102. And going strong, Marvel. And feisty. Puts up with Noel. I mean, that's worth another couple of years at least.
We gather.
Next Saturday. I forgot what's happening next Saturday. Huh? Oh, yeah, right. Sorry. The Ukraine thing threw me. So next Saturday, our big event is the 12th. It's at 7 o'clock. It's free. Suggested donation, $10. But we're going to try to, it's going to be great. There's going to be a puppet show. Sorry about that. And, you know. So it's going to be a puppet show. It's going to be Severin's band. There's going to be dancers. It's going to be in here. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's no dinner for COVID reasons. We didn't have enough time to pull that together now that the masks are who knows where. And we got masks on in here, preferably. I'm not going to kick you out if you don't, but that's the preference. And so it's going to be fun. So you should come and you should bring people. And it's sort of the mid part of our pledge drive. It's our anniversary event. And it has an immigration theme to it. It has humor in it. It has some hard spots. It's sort of vignettes of what an immigrant experiences. And, you know, these are sort of southern border stories more, but not exclusively. There's some African themes in there as well, and there's puppets. And you should come. Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Try to be here. Book for the group is The Sweetness of Water. That's coming up in March. And you can talk to Robin about that. And I don't know, I probably forget a bunch of things, so there we are. Did you do the words yet or not? No. Sorry.
Hi. We gather here together, each of us a flame, each of us burning with love and hope. Some burn brightly, other flames have dwindled, leaving just the faintest glow. Together we light this one flame to reflect the illumination we each bring to strengthen lights that have dimmed and to offer our love to brighten the world.
In one of the coming of age sessions we did just, 6 weeks ago or so, I was asked to do the principles and sources for our teens, and I'd done a very similar service before, but Tracy thought it was sort of relevant for us, and it's right in the sort of sweep of February kind of into March is kind of UU time in my brain. And there's really no other easier service for someone like me to sort of explain what's going on, but I'm going to walk through kind of how we got to us is the basic theme. This is a classic UU, it would be a good membership service for us. It's a good chance to sort of hear a little bit of how we became who we are over the last 50 or 60 years. So let's sing our opening hymn, Here We Have Gathered 360. Here we have gathered.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our life. matter small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can, sing now together this our heart's own song.
You guys sounded great. Not that that's unusual, but I'd like to invite our young or young at heart down forward for what we call a story of all ages. Here we are. Oh, I have flyers. Hold on. Forgot my flyers. So I have flyers. It's the same flyer that's going to be up there. You want to pass those out? So there's a situation. If you guys follow the news at all about Ukraine and the war, there's a war, and there's a lot of people, and they're trying to get them out to safe passage, and they're trying to negotiate a kind of roads and places where they're not going to bomb, so people can get out of harm's way. And back here, steal this for a second. It was a group called the Service Committee. We're going to do a split plate for the the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee Emergency Fund, which is going to help people in the Ukraine. And that's the UU Service Committee started. And you know our chalice, that image up there, right, that the kids are looking at? So this picture is set to mark a time in which the Service Committee got started, and there were Unitarians, and they were smuggling people out of World War II. I'm sure there'll be amazing stories of people being smuggled out of here that we haven't quite heard yet, because it's happening right now, right? This is a moment in history, a sad, tragic moment in history. But when tragedy happens, there's a chance to be our best selves, isn't there? Right? And when you're in a situation where there's bullying at school, it's your chance to be your best self. So we like to think that we're a church that encourages people to be their best selves, and we at that moment were. There were a number of different people who, in that time, rose to the occasion. And there's a whole movie, the Sharps were a couple that smuggled people out. They got a whole boat, and they pulled a lot of people out of Europe back in World War II. All people of all different races and stuff. So this is a little coloring thing. You can take it home, you can think about it, but when they were coming up with a logo for the Unitarians, part of why we have a chalice is there was a little bit of, it's a mixed story, but one of the reasons was there was a hospital in Eastern Europe that had, you know, the snake is the sign of the doctors, like, and they wrapped around a little thing. So that, huh? Yeah, that. And there was that in a unique design on a fence, and that became a safe place for people to go. So people could go in there, and it became like a secret code. So part of our chalice has to do with being a little bit of a secret code. You guys have secret codes with your friends at all? Like secret handshakes or things that you just have sort of on the inside? Right? You guys have that, right? Your little secret stories and, you know. So that is, the chalice has a history of being part of a secret story of where people could be safe, kind of like the Underground Railroad you might have heard about. There were different, and the symbol of the fish was a secret story, a secret image for Jesus, right? That the fish, if you see the fish image, that's how people kind of knew that that was a safe place. So we have a history in our church of creating a safe place and safe passage for people to get out. And I wanted to tell you that story today, and you can take that home and you can think about how hard it would be to have to leave your home, not knowing whether you can ever return or not, and think about how appreciative you would be of people who helped you in the most tough times. So we try to rise to be those people. That's what we're called to do, to help people, and of course, hopefully not to find ourselves in harm's way ourselves. So, deep thoughts, fun thoughts, cute pictures. How about that? Any thoughts on what you guys have seen over the last week? No? Okay. Let's sing out our kids with our Singing Out Our Kids song. Thank you.
Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us to the power of the faith within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the faith within.
I try to mix up the children's moment just to keep Severin on his toes over there. Our centering hymn is Winds Be Still, 83.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence comes, peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm let all find tranquility.
Joys and concerns. Leanne's going to light candles, and I'm going to pass the microphone around.
leads us in prayer.
May those who have known loss never feel alone. May those who have not feel more gratitude than entitlement. May those here with imperfect family relationships know that they are one of many. May the animals that fill our lives somehow feel how much they mean to us. May we all be touched by the power of forgiveness, and before that, a thoughtfulness about the impact our decisions may have. May jealousy never get the best of us, and may humor express rather than mask our concern for one another. This is a reading from Meg Barnhouse, and I had never heard of her, but now that I've heard of her, I'm going to find out more. She started out as a Presbyterian minister, ended up as a Unitarian minister. She's an author, a pundit, a songwriter. Interesting woman. I listen to people talk sometimes about liberal religion as if it's a thin gruel watered down to please everyone. Our 7 principles, they complain, are either too much like a creed or so general as to be meaningless. But my experience of the principles is that they are deeply demanding. The first one asks me to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I'm also supposed to value the democratic process, hearing the voice of everyone equally, allowing everyone to have a say. For those who feel they are thin gruel, I have a suggestion. Let's stick something on to the very end of the principles that will stop people from smiling and nodding comfortably as they are read. How about attaching, beginning in our homes and congregations, to each principle? Then we'd be faced with affirming things like the goal of peace, liberty, and justice for all, beginning in our homes and congregation. Everyone who has raised children knows that peace is often at odds with liberty, and that justice demands a disturbance of peace. To put those 3 together in one principle is both outrageous and lovely. It's easier to think about working towards them in some global context than in the context of Cheerios and pajamas, car keys, and cleaning up one's bedroom. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, beginning in our homes and congregations, is a sobering ideal too. Peace and compassion in my heart, justice too, freedom as well, affirming the worth of every person all the time, not only with my words and my behavior, but within my secret heart. For me, the heart of the liberal faith is to be connected to something greater than yourself, to wallow in the spirit of life, love, and truth, to have fair trade coffee and important conversations, to stand for love and to stand against quibbling, complaining, and flouncing off in a huff, to move toward being in right relation with ourselves, one another, and the planet. For me, this faith isn't thin gruel. It's a feast, prepared with effort, enjoyment, persistence, and commitment. Care to join me?
Thank you, Tracy. Meg Barnwell is sort of a force of nature. She's pretty cool. I've included these little red cards. You see them around there? They're the classic UU kind of elevator speech kind of thing. I request of you that you carry at least one of these. You can steal additional ones that are in the back up there. Kelly has a bunch, and they're around. And every once in a while, you'll find somebody that you think should be here. Just carry it around. Put it somewhere in your purse or wherever, and hand it to them, and have a moment of evangelism. We could use that. That's probably as effective as any marketing thing we could ever come up with. So, every once in a while we're accused of being a cult. I'm just going to talk about Unitarian Universalism in general. I tell them we're not nearly good enough at recruiting to be given that distinction. Likewise, evangelical megachurches want to think we worship Satan, and I tell them that our services aren't nearly that interesting. Mary Ann Stein was in the parking lot. She stood there. She can attest that I told her that, and she was talking about her and George's sort of church history and faith. And I said, well, we might not be Christian enough for you. And weirdly, that was enough to draw her in. She wanted me to mention that today. I don't know if she's here or not, but let's take a look at the 7 principles. You can have them on your front of your bulletin. They're also going to be right up here, even in fuller form. They've lasted virtually unchanged for almost 30 years. Now, 3 decades is a laughably short legacy for a written document that's religious. However, for the fastest evolving, quickly adaptive religious movement on the planet, not bad. Not bad. Intellectually, since we can't sit still for a moment and sort of can't seem to things lay on the page and sing along in the hymns very easily, then I think it's not too good, not too bad. So, since that is our specialty, right? Our specialty as you use is we're reading ahead in the hymnal to see what we disagree with more than any other faith. The 7 principles and 6 sources, which we'll talk about too, have been woven into our denominational life. They're right in the front of the hymnal, if you ever have one. They're digested enough as a guidepost for us that Beacon Press, the UU-owned book publisher, says that when they pull together or evaluate any criteria for what book they publish, they use those 2 sources as the judgment for what fits for us. So they're a tiny bit like having a creed. The question any UU has to ask themselves is, do they feel like they bind us? I don't feel like they bind us too much anyway. Our principles don't tell you that you can't drink milk while wearing wool or you have to tithe. Our principles here's how I would rephrase the principles for anyone who is coming into the church. Our principles ask you to consider that maybe, if you spiritually feel up to it, you try to see the good in others, try to cooperate in democratic ways that build a peaceful world, think about what your mind and soul really calls you to do and reflect on the interconnected way that things work. That's sort of the way we kind of approach them. They're guidelines. The first of the UU set of principles was adopted in 1961 when we were sort of coming together. It was the fighting points for how we came together, and I want to project them up here and sort of just kind of in a sequence. This was the first 7 principles. There were 6 of them, so we can read along with them. They're similar. You'll notice. I'm not going to read through them, but you'll notice that it's like a rough draft version of what we got. You'll notice a little bit more masculine language in there. You'll notice a little bit more Christian-focused language in there probably too. The earliest version did not come in without any controversy, nor did they live long before they were really challenged. The truth is, the 1961 statement that was written to serve was hotly debated to gather the two U's together. And we fought over it enough that they nearly prevented the merger. The time then was sort of theological. The heart of the debate was, as we merged, if and how our principles would speak about our Judeo-Christian heritage and roots, and whether to include such phrases as love to God and love to man right in the heart of them. Not that different than today, but a little. Before Universalists and Unitarian could merge, they fought for a nearly 24-hour session over how to deal with the new union, and particularly in its relationship to Christianity, which is, of course, our roots. When you think about how Christian we are, there are really a couple good answers. The more you focus and honor who we were as a movement, the more you feel that the need to honor that is the degree to which you think we're still mostly Christian. The more you focus on the uniqueness from other traditions, on how open and evolving we are, and the degree to which you see us separate from the past is really to the degree to which you think that we're not particularly attached to that faith. The fact that the Universalists remained exclusively Christian for longer, and they already came in humbled, they were sort of poorer and a little bit less in numbers than the Unitarians were, and they were more Christian, it wrinkled the waters even a little bit more. So the merger between our two faiths began percolating in the RE programs. RE programs were brought together and did cross-pollinating stuff from all far back as in the 20s. And in the 60s, we didn't really need each other as much as there were less and less reasons for us to be apart. So eventually we came together without too much rancor and compromise. So they decided they wanted to specifically reference the Jewish and Christian traditions from which we were born, but not tightly define ourselves that way anymore. It's the only really specific religious tradition mentioned. Everything else falls under world religions. But so the fight really was, in the end, it was decided to be framed as not our Judeo-Christian heritage, but the Judeo-Christian heritage. That was a big fighting point. Was it ours or was it the? You know what you use. Put 3 UUs in a room and you got 4 opinions. To cherish and spread the universal truth taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immorally summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. And Garcia, you thought this was going to be boring. The original 6 stood from 61 to 85, but in the mid-70s, the turn, the uncomfortableness had already started. See, the 70s during the feminist revolution and the era when the earth-based concerns started to rise up for everyone, we were very much affected by that cultural shift. Of course, being the church that invites in cultural trends, or as we like to call it, new revelations, we do like to say that revelation is not sealed. Have you heard that phrase? That's a thing. We don't believe that revelation or truth or emerging truth is sealed historically best in lost, past documents like the Bible. Right? We think that truth evolves and we must evolve with it. That's why we don't have a creed and we have principles. So, as the wisdom of feminism spread, there came a challenge to the extent that how we would relate to the patriarchal history of Christianity, right, particularly the language, became very important, right? And there was a lot of cakes for the Queen of Heaven. Who here participated in that? Anyone? I know Penny would have done that for sure. So Cakes for the Queens of Heaven was a very popular curriculum around biblical verses and that uplifted women and had women's phrases in there. The phrase, the dignity of man, which you saw in there earlier, was underlined, was a particular disdain for these feminists. By the late 70s, it became clear that most U's paying attention, the old U principles, were sexist in the language that they had. They were. The women of the UU Women's Association and the Women's Association and the Service Committee are 2 groups that have a particular connection to the UUA. They sort of have this historic alliance that other connected groups don't have, so they're particularly important. So Women's Association has been a powerful, not so much anymore, but was a powerful force in all churches, or many churches, did a lot of hands-on kind of social justice sort of stuff. Interestingly, our Women's Association had 2 consecutive presidents of the association that went on to become the UUA moderators. And if you know anything about GA, moderators control the conversation about how things get debated. They're really as powerful as the president, because when it comes to church law, they sort of moderate that conversation. So they had, in '77, there was a GA resolution titled Women in Religion, which sort of passed unanimously, and that was followed in '79 by a women's conference that affirmed that those principles attacked women, and they were out to sort of change those laws. So they added to the definitive no that the principles not only affirmed it in this survey, affirmed them as women, but failed to indicate a respect for the wholeness of life and of the earth. So you can feel the 7th principle kind of emerging in the background as well. So there was an understanding that emerged during all this time that oppression of women and oppression of the earth were connected together. Natalie Gulbranson, who later served as moderator and was also the president, said that she'd listened to a lot of contentious speeches. And she said that the idea of how heated these debates could be were present in her mind. So when that resolution came up, they decided to put it in hold and sort of put it into committee, essentially, and send it out into the congregations to have conversations with it. In 1981, a non-sexist revision of the principles and purposes drafted by various women's groups was presented to the General Assembly. It caused great uneasiness again among the more Christian voices in the UU movement, who saw it as tantamount to writing them out of the movement. They sort of felt like they had already taken enough hits, giving up the Christian side of our tradition being lifted up so exclusively. And it was Denny Davidoff who convinced Gulbranson to sort of put it in pause. So they took it out to the denominations. They asked whether they were going to change that specific language from mankind and fatherhood of God. They took a red pen to that. Interestingly enough, brotherhood and fellowship survived the first editorial pens of reform, because that was thought to be almost a Christian reference point in the way, right? Brotherhood is kind of sisterhood's kind of a phrase that you have historically in religious language. So, anyway, before the removal of the masculine language, there was a conflict in the air. There was a fear that the process was going to divide the UU Church in those early 80 years, and they were very present to the threat of dividing people, because many people who've been involved with the Unitarian Universalism for a long time remember that in the late 60s there was a big walkout in GA over race. There was money promised to an African American caucus, and that money got pulled back, not got of any effort of racism, at least not active racism. It was more that there was just money not returned, and there was a big fight over that. So there was a concern about this being a divisive issue for Unitarians. So there was a letter sent around the impending debate on whether to amend this. People said it could be a situation where some group wins, but the entire association loses. Ministers called for open dialogue and an appointment of a committee to study the situation. So very sexy at the time in which we're looking at a global conflict, right? However, to make matters better in the world but worse for a sermon, they didn't have a fight. They didn't throw sticks at each other at GA. With fear of the schism, they caused a pause in the vote, and they took it to special committee again. And there were some people who thought it was a stall tactic and the UUA was moving too slowly. The fact that by the early 80s there were so many women in leadership positions that the idea that there were masculine language around ministry in particular needed to change. So, it's exciting? Really nothing about this process, actually. You know what happened next? So from 81 to 85, based on revisions in the 1982 discussions, there was a whole committee, and they suddenly basically brought it for the committee in 84. wording more or less stood, came up for a second vote in the following year, and passed with only one dissenting vote. You'll note that most of the concepts we have in today's principles and purposes have appeared in one form or another. It looked kind of resonant with the old one, right? Similar at least. And they got out of the Christian quagmire a little bit by adding to the statement known as the sources. Let's read through what we call our sources. These are my favorite parts of it. We're going to look that up here. So this is the sources that define what's sort of in the ballpark of what we call our religion. And they are the direct experience anyone has in a spiritual way, right? Staring at a sunset or feeling whatever it is that you feel spiritual about. That's the first thing. Liberal religious people tend to think of experience as being the most authoritative thing we have. It's not scripture, it's not dogma, it's your own experience as a human being. The second one are words and deeds of prophetic people from all over the world, right? They're not just Christian or Jewish, they're just prophetic people, you know, kind of like the president of the Ukraine now. He's almost become a prophetic person, right? We sort of admire those people, and the things they say and the deeds they do inform us. Wisdom from the world's religions which inspire us. So the world religions get a little nod here, right? The whole kind of panorama of Buddhism and all of that. And then we've got the Jewish and Christian teachings, particularly ones that call us to love our neighbor, are cited exclusively, the only ones cited separately. And then humanist teachings, which sort of are the science of things, right? They call us to be judgmental and skeptical. That skeptical side of us is given point of place here too. And then came around in the end, just like the seventh principle did, the world-centered religious traditions, like the history of paganism, not necessarily part of the world religious tradition spectrum, but brought in at the end to honor sort of what's been uplifted for the last 30 years. So there we go. That's the 6 sources that inform our faith. So, in this really exciting story of how we got to us, it's not so much that anyone had a vision of God's truth or of the future. It's not so much that people were content-oriented. We are really much more process-oriented. Much less exciting than in the good old days when you could throw the opposition out the window and their vote didn't count, which is what defenestration is. That's how a lot of the church councils worked out. They would just kick out people till the vote was right. You know? Decide it's okay to invade Congress is sort of in that same spirit, isn't it? But in 1995, we added the phrase referring to the 5 living world religious traditions from which we draw that earth-centered religions. Essentially, minus the anchor, the 7th principle, everything was sort of up to date. The 7th principle, a respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, hadn't really been anticipated. Its inclusion was overwhelmingly mandated in responses from people, and its happy wording as it's described, it's kind of how it's described historically, the happy wording of the 7th principle emerged from the floor, for it was sort of immediately recognized as the right language. So it became unifying, and we've listened to those voices, and we move along. As you know, we have a hard time agreeing on a lot, where the kind of the butt of you jokes is, you know, that we sort of overthink things. And it's appropriate, for within such a small and evolving church, our disagreements sort of haven't been terribly small. We can't decide really essentially whether this is described as worship here or as a Sunday service, right? We go back and forth about how really free and independent we are, and how connected we are to our denomination. Just to list a few range of ways UUs can be perplexing, just kind of a fun way to think about how much of a hot mess we are. We don't know if we should have any more allegiance to our Christian roots than we say our Buddhist leanings, right? That's unclear. We have 2 things that probably matter more than anything, and that is this. We know that the idea of tolerance is very important to us. And that comes most poignantly back in the time of the Reformation, where Francis David in Transylvania famously said, does anybody know? Bob? What did Francis David say? Andy? We need not think alike to love alike. Thank you. And that sort of became a touchstone for us, right? And it's a beautiful thing. Like, we can disagree and still sit next to each other. And we've entered also, I would add to that tolerance, a sense of how we are going to be with one another. I'm going to just read through a simple version of the 2nd through 5th of our principles. Just close your eyes and listen. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and the encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Followed by a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. There is no specific truth in there, is there? It's a process. We encourage people to be spiritual in their own ways, and for us to be just and equitable in the way that we relate to one another. William Sloane Coffin, a thoughtful activist and outspoken former chaplain at Yale, says, I like the UUs. They might have a thin theology, but they have a thick ethic. And I think that's true. We have a thick sense of ethics. Walter Jones was referenced earlier, talking a lot about the process. He said that apart from the Quakers and their time-honored desire for consensus, it is unlikely that the history of religion provides any comparable example of such intentional and committed use of inclusive, non-hierarchical processes to produce a guiding statement as ours has. I think we deserve a round of applause for that. In a world that can't get along. Essentially, I believe we do religion in a way that nobody else does. We know that it's going to change, and we know that there'll be disagreement about that. So our religion is built first for process and dedicated that way. This is not a small matter. UUs don't believe that the ends justify the means, but that the right means lead to the right ends. I would love to well up with pride here that we are the answer. Sorry, no explosions or anyone getting shot at a General Assembly. It's not that sexy, but deep in my bones, I believe we're the answer. So, it was boring. I know. You know what's good about boring? Nobody gets killed. Nobody gets beaten up or even shut up. Trump would hate our process. But in a context where we as Americans seem to be entertained and insult one another and laugh at each other more decisively and quickly with our chests puffed out, isn't it kind of almost stodgy and old-fashioned and civilized to force ourselves to talk about it? That's your tradition. I'd love to roll out that slow, boring tape of what it would like if UUs were in charge of the world. Wouldn't that be nice? I just wonder if we just couldn't pull it off. And I'll leave you with that lingering thought. Amen. And now more lightheartedly. There was a Baptist minister. This Baptist minister is hosting a pre-marriage class, and those who want to be married in the church that he served. And at the end of the first class, he says, I need you to abstain from sex this week. Next week comes, and the pastor's got the would-be married couples before them and, starts to ask the question. Turns to one couple and says, we were able to abstain. Yes, Pastor, it was tough, but on your advice, we abstained. The pastor turns to a young couple, a middle-aged couple, and they were able to do it as well. And the pastor turned to a young couple and the future wife-to-be, and she sheepishly says, we were doing really good, but my fiance reached down for a package of paper towels, and, we had a moment of weakness. Sorry. The pastor says, I hate to break this to you, but in terms of getting married, you're not welcome to do that here. Yeah, well, the bride says, we're not welcome at Costco anymore either. Give generously and make your pledge. Please join me in our affirmation of gratitude. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us also be grateful even for our needs, so that we may experience the generosity of others. Our closing hymn is Love is the Greatest Gift of All.
Life is the greatest gift of all, the richest on this earth. Life and its creatures, great and small, of high and lowly birth. So treasure it and measure it with deeds of shining worth. Mind is the brightest gift of all, its thought no barrier mars. It seeks the creature's hidden plan, its quest for mounts the bars. It rains the wind, it changes the storm, it weighs the outmost stars. We are of life, its shining gift, the measure of all things. Up from the dust our temples lift, our visions soar on wings. For seed and root, for flower and fruit, our grateful spirits soar.
This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste and blessed be. And now our service truly begins.
Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each flower contains pennies from heaven? You'll find your fortune falling all over town. Make sure that your umbrella is upside down. Trade them for a package of sunshine and flowers. If you want the things you love, you must have showers. So when you hear it thunder, don't run under a tree. There'll be pennies from heaven for you and me.
It rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know the clouds contain pennies from heaven? You find your fortune falling all over town. Your umbrella has got to be upside down. Sunshine and flowers. If you want the things you love,
there must be showers.
There must be showers.
If you hear it thunder,
don't run under a tree.
There'll be pennies from heaven. Pennies from heaven. Pennies from heaven. Pennies from heaven. from heaven, pennies from heaven, pennies, pennies from heaven. Pennies from heaven. Pennies, prayers, pennies, prayers, pennies, 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 prayers, pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven. Pennies from heaven for you and
Really coming out of your shell there, Linda. It's nice to see. It's just nice. So, Family Fun Day after this. De Benneville Pines, if you're interested and you haven't told Andy, go tell him that. Pledge Drive, Godfrey in 2 weeks. Amen. Oh, voting postcards.